On a frozen hillside in rural Bavaria, a small farmstead sat alone at the edge of the woods, more than half a mile from its nearest neighbor. The locals called it Hinterkaifeck. In the spring of 1922, 6 people lived there, and within the space of a single evening, all 6 would be dead. What makes this case so chilling isn't only the brutality of the crime. It's what happened in the days before, and the days after, that no one has ever explained. For weeks, the head of the household, a gruff farmer named Andreas Gruber, had noticed things he couldn't explain. Fresh footprints appeared in the snow, leading out of the forest and up to the farm, but there were no tracks leading back. Someone had walked to the house and never left. He searched the property and found no one. Still, the sense that a stranger was somewhere close, watching and waiting, refused to go away. The unsettling signs multiplied. Gruber heard footsteps in the attic and the creak of movement overhead at night. A set of house keys vanished without explanation. He found a newspaper on the property that no one in the family had bought or brought home. The mechanism of the door lock had been tampered with. He mentioned some of this to neighbors in passing, almost as a curiosity, but he never called the police, and he never left his land. The household was made up of Andreas, his wife Kazilia, and their widowed daughter Victoria. Victoria's 2 children lived there too, 7-year-old Kazilia and a 2-year-old boy named Joseph. The 6th member was a maid named Maria Baumgartner, who had arrived that very day to begin her employment. She would be dead within hours of setting down her bags. Only days earlier, the previous maid had quit, convinced the farm was haunted. The Gruber family kept to themselves, and the surrounding villages whispered about them. There were dark rumors of abuse and secrets behind the farmhouse walls, and Andreas was not well liked. Whatever the truth of those stories, they meant the family had few close friends, and few people likely to notice quickly if something went wrong. On an isolated farm, cut off by fields and forest, days could pass before anyone came to check. That is exactly what happened. When young Kazilia failed to appear at school, and the family missed church that Sunday, mild concern spread but nothing more. It wasn't until the following Tuesday that neighbors finally walked up to Hinterkaifeck to investigate. The postman had noticed mail piling up. A local mechanic had come and gone. Something felt wrong across the whole property, a silence where there should have been the ordinary noise of farm life. The men made their way to the barn first. There, stacked beneath a layer of hay and a door, they found 4 bodies: Andreas, Kazilia, their daughter Victoria, and little Kazilia. All had been struck repeatedly and killed with a mattock, a heavy farming pick. Inside the house, they found the maid dead in her room and the toddler Joseph dead in his cot beside his mother's bed. The whole family had been wiped out. Then came the detail that has haunted investigators ever since. The killer had not fled after the murders. Whoever it was had stayed at the farm, perhaps for several days. The livestock had been fed and cared for. Fresh food had been eaten in the kitchen. Smoke had been seen rising from the chimney by neighbors who assumed the family was simply home. Someone had been living calmly inside the house of the dead. When the police arrived, forensic science was still primitive, and the crime scene had already been disturbed by the local men who found the bodies. Investigators even removed the victims' heads and sent them to Munich, where clairvoyants were consulted in a desperate bid for answers. Hundreds of suspects were questioned over the following years. Yet no murder weapon led anywhere, no confession held up, and no clear motive could be established. Robbery seemed unlikely, since money was left untouched in the house. Suspicion fell in many directions. Some pointed to Victoria's late husband, supposedly killed in the war, whispering that he had returned. Others suspected a neighbor, or a jealous rival, or even someone within the family's own tangled history. A local man was investigated for years. Decades later, in the 1980s, a deathbed confession was rumored, but it named names that could not be verified. Every promising thread eventually frayed into nothing. The theories continue to divide historians. Was the killer a drifter who had hidden in the attic for weeks, explaining the footsteps, the missing keys, and the tracks in the snow? Was it a robbery gone wrong, or a personal vendetta rooted in the family's secrets? The strangest question of all remains why the murderer lingered, feeding cattle, cooking meals, sleeping under the same roof as 6 people they had just slaughtered. That behavior points to something deeply personal, or deeply disturbed. In 2007, students at a German police academy re-examined the case with modern methods. They reached a conclusion about the most likely suspect but chose not to release the name, out of respect for living descendants. The farmhouse itself was demolished a year after the killings, and beneath its foundations searchers reportedly found the missing house key. A century later, Hinterkaifeck remains unsolved, a quiet Bavarian field that still refuses to give up its secret.